Hear, Lord, and be merciful to me. Lord, be my help. And as Darren's getting ready, let us not be silent. And that's what Darren is doing here. And I told Darren I was going to build him up high. I'm MC right here. Introduction to Matthew. That is his message right there. And what we need is not to be silent. And that is Darren. He is not being silent. No, serious. This is a guy here who had got a vision, and we took a road trip, and we must have gone like 2,000 miles or whatever. Now here we are, a couple years later, and he's still not being silent. And that is what God doesn't want us to be. He does not want us to be silent, and Darren has not let this bone go. And that is fantastic. That is worthy. That is worthy of what we want and what we need, not to be silent. So as I was looking for a scripture, it's just like such a time as this, and I don't know, Esther, Mordecai, that is such a time as this. And I go, okay, and I kept going down looking for a scripture, then this popped up. We can't be silent. Darren is not going to let this go, and we should not be silent. So without further ado, Darren is here.
Thanks, guys. I guess I'm on now. I really don't need a mic because everyone tells me I talk loud enough anyway, so this will really get to you guys now. All right, so what I'm doing is an introduction to Matthew. So I don't know if everybody has Bibles anymore. They're on their phone. If you're on your phone, you don't get to follow this one important little thing here. So how did we get to Matthew? We got to start actually in the Old Testament. But if you do have a Bible, I'd like you to turn the last page of Malachi and in between is Matthew. You notice your Bible has a clear page. Some Bibles have one full page and then it says New Testament, or it's just a blank page. That page right there represents 400 years. And it's 400 years of silence. It's not that nothing didn't happen in that time. It's just that God did not speak anything. He didn't send any prophets. So this is 400 years. So, in the Old Testament, when we leave off in Malachi, Persia is in charge. When we flip the page over here, Rome's in charge. Okay? We flip back. Most people are speaking Aramaic and Hebrew. We turn the page. Everybody in the known world is mostly speaking Greek. They are still speaking in some areas Aramaic, but it's mostly Greek known around the world. So how did we get there and why? So of course you guys know that I like my backdrop here, the Casket Empty series that I'm doing. But we have to go back to the Old Testament because Matthew refers back 16 times, this is as the prophet said, or as it was written. So he refers back to the Old Testament many times. So can everybody has their Casket Empty folders? Here it is. So I would like to start with this. And what's real important on this backdrop, I know you guys have it in front of you, so that'll make it easier. I want to concentrate on the covenants of the Old Testament. I'm not going to go through this whole thing like I normally do, but if I could concentrate on the covenants. So, casket, first it means creation, Abraham, Sinai, kings, exile, and temple. I love that because that is the whole story of the Old Testament in a short version. Okay? The New Testament, which I am going to be getting a backdrop, it's a whole series, it's called Empty. So this is Casket Empty. This stands for the expectations, Messiah, Pentecost, teachings, like in Paul's teaching, and why is yet to come. So they will line up. When the Old Testament takes off right here, this backdrop will take off right here from the Messiah, and it continues on. So this is becoming. Now the expectation is that 400 years of what happened when these 39 books finish. So these 39 books in the Old Testament cover 4,000 years. The New Testament is one lifetime. Pretty much that's what it is. It's just one lifetime. It's much more, it's fast moving. But God does his build up And he does a long introduction to get to Matthew, 4,000 years worth. So, to concentrate on most of my covenants, if you guys look on your pamphlets and you go to creation, you'll see the Noahic covenant down here where the rainbow is. So, everything goes through creation. We get to the Noahic covenant. That is a promise that God makes. That's an unconditional promise that he will never flood the earth again or destroy humanity with water. Okay, that's covenant number 1. Covenant number 2 is with Abraham. We go all the way to Abraham. Abraham, God takes him out and gives him promises. This is another unconditional covenant. Okay? He promises him that he'll have many descendants. These are just bullet points that are on there. If we go in depth, we could do further, but these are all just bullet points. He will be father of many nations. And this one, really important for my story, is that kings will come from his line. And it's right beside that is Judah. That's the line of Judah. Okay. The reason you got a gift right there is because God just gave him that. This was another unconditional covenant. So, Abraham has a son, Isaac. Isaac has a son, Jacob. Jacob, God changes his name to Israel. Okay? So, Jacob/Israel, and sometimes in the Bible, they still refer back to Jacob, like Jacob's troubles. That's Israel. They mean Israel's troubles. Same thing right here. Jacob has 12 sons, which become 12 tribes. Just like my tribe is back here today. I have 2. So, they get enslaved in Egypt. All of them, okay? God chooses, they're in slavery for like 400 years. God chooses Moses to get them out of slavery. So he does that, gets them out of slavery. They cross over the Red Sea, and they get to Mount Sinai. So now we have the 12 tribes of Israel/Jacob in Mount Sinai. Now, God gives Moses another covenant, but this is a conditional covenant. All the others were unconditional. This one has, it's back and forth. If you do this and obey my laws that I give you, you will be blessed. But if you don't, curses will come upon you. Okay, so this one is a very important issue. So it says right here, don't worship other gods. That's number 1. We're going to find out that's a lot of their problems right there. So as of day 1, when God did this, God could have ended it all. Because what did they do? They built a calf, started worshiping him right away. Okay? Because that's kind of how us human beings are. But I love this part. It's written down there. The Lord God, compassionate and gracious and slow to anger and abounding in loving kindness and truth. And that's what God does for us throughout in the Jewish people for this 400 years that I'm going to talk about. Okay, so we have this covenant right here. I'm going to refer back to this covenant and the covenant given to David. Okay, because these are real important covenants. Well, so was Abraham. They're all important. So when they get through, when they're up there in Mount Sinai and God gives them all this, they also build a tabernacle. My favorite subject. The tabernacle is a way for God to be able to dwell with his people ever since they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. That's why that tabernacle was built, so God could forgive their sins, and they're teaching them how, so he can dwell with them. Okay, life goes on. They're trying to make it to the promised land. And they come up to King David. Will you give me slide 1, please? Sorry, my phone didn't download, but that would have been a hassle anyway. Okay, so up here on this map, we have 12 tribes, and God has their land allotment in Israel. So with everything going on today, I want you guys to realize that belongs to Israel from God. God created the earth. He'll give any portion to it who he wants to. So he gives the 12 tribes each of a land allotment. Okay, that's where they're going to live and be in that land allotment. So they're over here in the promised land, in their land allotment, and God says to King David, let me go back one step here, just to make sure we understand this. The 12 tribes, Jacob, one of his sons of these 12 tribes is Judah. And that's real important to this, because Judah right here is the line that goes to the Messiah. So that is a promise that God is going to give King David right here. So God has chosen a king from the line of Judah, anointed by Samuel in Bethlehem. Jerusalem, the holy city now, is the capital. We see up there, Jerusalem is the holy city and capital, which it still is today. Okay, his son of God relationship. His son will build the temple. God's grace in spite of all of their sin. That's the bottom line down here, which I think is amazing. So David's son, Solomon, builds a temple. The temple replaces the tabernacle that was built over here. So now they don't have to carry this around the desert no more. They build a hard structure temple. This is where all the problems begin, right after Solomon, because they continue to sin. So I'm actually getting there. I think we can reach this before Jesus comes back. Right here they have many problems. They, up here, this line up here, the north, 10 of the tribes go to the north. Okay, and only 2 of the tribes come down south on the Judah line. And remember, this is the line that comes. Here they follow the kings. If you see that it's handed down through families. And we're going to get a chance to see this genealogy when we get to the first chapter, the very first page of Matthew. We're going to get to see this genealogy come to fruition. Okay? So we get down to here, and I bet out of all of these kings, from the north to the south, there's only like 8 good kings. Out of 400 years, that's all there was. But God, of course, back here, is slow to anger, gracious, and wants to be with us. So he's very forgiving. So finally, though, after some bad stuff that goes on with everything, God's covenant that he made back here, the blessings and the curses, you see this eagle right here? That's not eagle. That's a vulture. That's the curses. So what happens right here? God's not going to protect them no more. Can we go to the next slide? The Babylonian Empire, you see, takes over all of that God promised them. Because if God wasn't protecting them no more, now the Babylonian Empire takes them over. And their king is Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar he does it in 3 series, and it's called the deportations. That word is also mentioned in Matthew about deportation. So we got to familiarize ourselves and be bathed in the Old Testament so we make the New Testament makes better sense. Not more sense, better sense. Today's Sunday. The first deportation that I want to talk about was a young man named Daniel. Because he's very important to how what we know what happened in that 400 years of silence. Without Daniel telling us what was going to happen, they would have just been guessing on all that. So, next slide, please. That's all right. There we go. So, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. He puts Daniel, remember, he captured him and put him in his high court to interpret dreams. He has a whole bunch of high court, what did I put over here in my notes? So it was an elite high group of people that were right underneath the king, that are his advisors, things like that. So Daniel was there. So King Nebuchadnezzar goes, all right, all of you advisors, you have to interpret my dream. But if you can't interpret it, I want to know you got to tell me what I dreamt to make sure you're on the up and up. Otherwise, I'll kill you because you're worthless. You really don't know how to interpret nothing. And I might even throw in and kill all your family too, because that's how the kind of guy he was. So Daniel's like, whoa, don't kill anybody. I work for a great God, and I know what that is. So he explains to him. He says, this is a statue, you dreamed of a statue, and the head of gold is you and your empire. But you will be taken over by an inferior country, which is going to be Persia. And that's exactly what happens. So I want you guys to notice on this statue, it goes gold, silver, bronze, and then iron. Notice that each metal is stronger, but it's not worth as much. It's less value. So that's the dream he had. So, and with that actually happens in here, is Persia comes over and takes over all of Israel and all of, can you go to slide 4, please? Yeah, that's the Persian Empire now. Actually, go back to slide 2, just real quick. Slide 2 real quick. Sorry, if I had this. So you see Persia down in the bottom right-hand corner?
Yeah.
Okay, Persia, and they call it Medo-Persia, take over this whole area in here. Okay, just like Daniel predicted. Now go back to slide 4, please. Then Persia takes over. One thing I forgot to mention, when Nebuchadnezzar took over everything, these 3 deportation, on his last one, he destroys Jerusalem, which means he destroyed the temple. He desecrated the temple. So during the Persian War, when the Persians take over, they actually allow some of the Jewish people to go back to Jerusalem, some of the priests, and build the temple again and start building. So right here, the temple's being rebuilt, but there's no evidence of God in the temple. So the glory of God does not return here, even though they have a temple. So this is where we get some of the minor prophets and the last of the Old Testament. But the last part of the Old Testament is Malachi, and he's the last Old Testament prophet. And it says his main objective is the Lord is coming has been delayed due to the people. The Lord will return to his temple, but a prophet like Elijah will come first to prepare his way. Then he will come. Basically, that's where the Old Testament ends. We have the Persian Empire that just took over from the Babylonians. And now if we go back to slide 3, please. The one with Nebuchadnezzar. Right here. We still have 2 more countries that are going to take over. Now this part is not in the Bible. This was just in history books, but it is in the Bible because Daniel wrote about it and told everybody about it 500 years before it happened. So they shouldn't be surprised. So right here we have the belly and thighs are bronze. That is the Greek Empire. Now, the Greek Empire was ran by a young man, and his name was Alexander the Great. Now, how did he become so great? Well, when he was kind of a spoiled kid, his dad was high up, gave him a tutor of Aristotle. So Aristotle was the Alexander the Great's tutor when he was younger. By the age 19, Alexander the Great spread the Greek language pretty much over the entire known world, and he took over the entire known world. Within 10 years, he was 29 years old, and he was bored now because there was no other countries to take over. He had accomplished that he thought everything. He died 2 years later in a drunken stupor. So can we go back to the number 5? It's the Greek Empire. So on his deathbed, they asked Alexandra, he goes, who is going to take your place? And he says, give it to the strong. He had 4 generals. He had 2 generals up in the north, the Seleucid Empire. That's one of them. They had one over here. They had basically 2 in the north and 2 in the south. And you see where Jerusalem is right there. Well, let me get some of my notes here to make sure I'm on the right track. Look at that. I just finished page 1 and I got 6 pages. I will catch up here. All right, so Alexander the Great, So yeah, Alexander the Great broke his empire up into 4 kingdoms, basically, on his deathbed, which I think is what caused them to fall. This one king named Antiochus IV, he was over here in the north. He marched upon Jerusalem several times, and what he did is he stopped sacrificing the temple. He hated the Jewish people. He offered a pig on the altar on the sacrifice table. He desecrated all the holy vessels and seized them. And he erected a statue of Zeus and made all the Israelites praise and worship Zeus. Okay, so he was a bad guy. But finally, in 165 BC, so I want you guys to notice, the Greek Empire started from 330, so about halfway through, these priests down just south of Jerusalem started revolting. And they pushed them back. So they pushed the Greeks back out of Jerusalem and took over their temple. They got all of the holy vessels back. They blessed them all. But when it came to the temple menorah, the 7-branch menorah, I think Shelley knows this one, they only had enough oil for 1 day. But miraculously, it lasted an additional 8 days. So that gives 9. And that's what they call Hanukkah today. So the Jewish people celebrate Hanukkah, and with a 9-branch menorah, because it recommends the 1 day they had for oil and the 8 additional days that it miraculously lasted. Or, instead of Hanukkah, it could be the Festival of Lights. And Jesus actually attended the Festival of the Lights in the Bible. Okay, so that's where we get Hanukkah from. So this is all in that silent period that's celebrated today. So now, takes us up to 63 BC. If you could flip go to the next one, please. Now we're under the Roman Empire. It's huge. They take over basically the known world and beyond from where the Babylonians thought there was in Alexander the Great. Notice down below where it says Alexander right underneath Jerusalem. I'm going to get back to that, but I just want you guys to realize where that's at for Alexandria. So now we're going to be approaching the New Testament. How was that for an opening for the New Testament so far? All right. Now I flip the page to my Bible. They're speaking Greek, and now I know why. They're under Roman Empire. Now I know why. All those different changes, now it makes sense. Why the Romans now in charge. There's synagogues in here. There's no synagogues in the Old Testament. Now we have synagogues. And synagogues back then were a way for the Jewish people to gather and talk about the Old Testament and the old laws. What did Moses mean on this one? How does it apply to us today? So, man, that was good. All right. Before we start in Matthew, I have more of an addition. I want to talk about the 4 Gospels in the Bible. Now, do we know what gospel means? Anybody? Good news. Very good. I love this one. Samuel. It means the good news. So there's 4 Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Can we go to the next page for me? Oh, you guys can't read it very well, but I will read it for you. All right. So this is what's really neat, I think, about the Gospels. There's 4 of them, and they're written from 4 different perspectives to 4 different groups. Okay. So Gordon always picks on Shelley, so I'm going to pick on Shelley. So this is how I look at this. Shelley has a race car, and she wipes out, okay? And there's 4 people that witnessed it. And here's Shelley wiped out. I don't know. Are you upside down? I don't know. There's 4 people that are witnessing what she did. And they are talking to 4 different people groups. So this person sees what happens. It's the same story, but things are more important to this person here. Same with this one. Same with this one. And they're writing to 4 different groups. And I'm going to explain what those groups are. Shelley, you should become a better driver. So Matthew's audience, he was writing to the Jews. He was the Jew. That's why in the Bible, when I said he refers back 16 times as the prophets, he is going back to the Old Testament because the people he's writing to understand that. Let's see. Mark, his audience is the Romans. He's writing, Jesus is the perfect servant. A Roman would understand that. A perfect servant. Immediately he went out and did that. And immediately. That is the verbiage that Mark uses. There's that word immediately. Immediately. Romans would understand that. Luke is writing to the Greeks. Jesus is the perfect man. He's the Son of Man. He's perfect in every way, but he's one of us. John is a little different. He is writing his audience as the whole world. So God so loved the world, he gave his only Son. So we must believe. So the first 3 books are the synoptic books. John is on a different. Synoptic means they're kind of written the same format, and the same, oh good, that's not me, I don't think. And the same format. That's synoptic. They're similar. And like I said, John is different. Now, what did they emphasize? Matthew concentrates on what Jesus said. And I know Samuel's giving his sermon next week, and you'll be able to see this. He's doing, he does the Sermon on the Mount, or he does the Beatitudes, I believe you're doing it on. So it's real important of what Jesus said. Mark is what Jesus did. Jesus went out and healed that person. Jesus went and did that. That's what he did. Luke is how Jesus felt. So if we read that, we know how Jesus was feeling. And then John is who Jesus was. He was God. Okay? So that's going pretty good. How am I on time, guys? Am I doing okay? All right. Page 3, not bad. This one will go fast. So now, who is Matthew? We can say he's a tax collector. Tax collectors back then were hated more than they are now, if you can believe that. That was really hard, okay? So back then, you could purchase that job. So you would go to your city councilor or whatever, the Romans, and say, I want to purchase the right to get taxes from these people. And whatever I collect that you need collected, I can collect that, but I get to keep whatever else that I get. So he's making money off the backs of other people. And that's why they put him in the same group as sinners and prostitutes in Matthew. But what does Jesus say to him? He comes up to him and says, follow me. Because Jesus goes to the sinners, and he goes to people and says, follow me. And he dropped everything and followed him. Okay. In the book of Matthew, the very first page, and why I went over this, you guys will kind of see. It's the genealogy of Matthew. Why is genealogy so important? When I was a new Christian, I thought Exodus was boring, and about the tabernacle. I've never heard anybody say, yeah, Matthew 1:4 is my favorite life verse, And Abraham, the father of that, has begotten that. So, I didn't even get it. But and I'm not even going to try and read this because I would just butcher those names. But I will read the first part of this. The genealogy of Jesus Christ. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David. Okay, we go back to these important people are. The son of Abraham. And then it talks about Abraham was the father of Isaac, the Isaac was the father of Jacob, and Jacob was the father of Judah. It goes right back to the Old Testament. So now when we're reading this, we're like, hey, this is all going to make sense. And if I follow that genealogy line, this is it. So why is that important in the book of Matthew? Why is that so important? Well, if I'm a Jew, and I'm going to say, hey, this is Jesus Christ, the first thing a Jew's going to say, yeah, prove it. What's his genealogical record? What gives him the right to be king? Well, if you don't come from this line, the Judah line, do you have a right to be king? No. You come from this line. These are the lines of the king that is going to come to the Messiah. Okay. And a genealogical record was so important that it also gave you the right to buy and sell land. So if you were going to buy and sell land, you had to make sure you were in the tribal allotment. So if you were in the tribe of Dan, you couldn't buy in the tribe of Judah. So it gave you the legal right. So Jesus had the legal right to be king of the Jews. Now, why is there... Hold on. Let me stop right there. Sorry. I do want to read one verse. After all of the genealogy, if we go to verse 17... This helps me because I don't have to mention all these kings' names here and butcher them up. So all the generations from Abraham to David were 14. So from Abraham to David is 14 generations. From David to the deportation to Babylon was another 14 generations. So see, there was a method of why I put the backdrop up. So from David to this deportation of Babylon during the exile was another 14 generations. And it's another 14 generations from Babylon to the birth of Christ. So that gives you can kind of short form it. And they did that so they could memorize their genealogy. And that was so important. For instance, if you wanted to serve as a priest, you had to show your lineage all the way back to the first priest, Aaron, in the tabernacle. You had to show your line. You had the right to be a priest all the way back to Aaron. But if you wanted to marry, your wife had to show that she had at least 5 generations in that line. That's why this is so important. So that's real important right there. But the prophecies, is my time doing good? All right, I want to have a little fun with stuff. Okay, so Matthew emphasized on the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies. Remember how I said he goes back, it was written, it was this. So I just want to I know I have some engineers in this group that like math. So I want to have a little fun with it. So in the Old Testament, there's about 330 prophecies. I've heard some more. I think I've even heard up to 500. But mainly what I hear is there's about 330 prophecies. And they've all come true except for the Y on the book empty, because that's Revelation. And that's the only part that hasn't come to fruition yet. Okay? So just as fun. So if we were to just have a book that gave 8 predictions that came true out of 330, that's the odds of taking the state of Texas and covering it 2 feet deep in silver dollars, marking one of those silver dollars, blindfolded a person, throw that quarter in there and say, go get that quarter on your first try. That's the same odds. So for Will and Pam, that is 1 times 10 to the 17th power. To get 16 of those right, this just proves the truth about the Bible that we read here, mathematically. That's why, and I have fun with that. To get 16 of those prophecies correct is like taking the whole earth, the difference from the earth to the sun, multiply that by 30, that distance, fill it with silver dollars, that big circle. It's the same thing. Blindfold somebody, send them in to get the silver dollar, which comes down to 1 times 10 to the 45th power. So just to get, now it was Peter Stoner that he's a mathematician that has fun with that stuff and statistics and things like that. Anyway, I thought you guys would enjoy that. But if you get 48 prophecies, then you have to get into nucleus and all of that. So you get into atoms. That's how big they have to be, you know, to make it work. Okay. In Matthew's genealogy, thought that was a good break. Have fun. Make sure everybody's awake here. Yeah. I woke you up by calling your name. Sorry about that, Will. Maybe I should start calling other people. Hey, Dave. I've already picked on Shelley. Who's next? Dave, there you go over here. Yeah. All right. So in Matthew's genealogy, the one thing that I think is a really good story is that his family tree, Jesus' family tree, has a lot of knots in it, just like one of us. I mean, okay, let me just say, so Abraham, he was a man of faith, but he lied twice about his wife being his sister. David, the greatest king ever, man after God's own heart, he was an adulterer, a murderer, a cover-up artist. I mean, he sent his wife-to-be, Bathsheba's husband, off to war, right? So it's not perfect. Another thing to be noted in here is that there's 4 women. Women were never mentioned in the genealogy. Okay? So there's things that happen in here, and I could go in more detail with those. But then we get to, where do I get to? I don't know. There is another genealogy in the Bible that I think we have to mention to clear up any confusion. If we go to Luke 3, verse 23, and you'll notice it says the genealogy of Jesus Christ again. Why the 2 genealogies? Why is this one in Luke different from the one in Matthew? Anybody? That's Mary's genealogy. So Mary's genealogy goes all the way back to Adam. And that shows that Jesus' purity, his bloodline purity, all the way to Adam. So now we have Jesus not only has the legal right to be king, now it shows that he has a pure bloodline to be king and priest. All the way back to Adam. Okay? So, when we get in here, we start with the birth of Jesus. But I want to end right there where I at that last sentence with Luke. And I just wanted to show the proof of how Jesus, what the Bible says is true. And what we took to get to Matthew. So that 400 years of silence that was in there, now we know there was 2 other countries that took over. The Jewish people went through a lot of hardship. And they went through that hardship because of why? This covenant right here. God just didn't give it to them. He wanted them to work for this one covenant. Be with me on my words, and I will bless you, and he will protect you. But if you don't, these curses will happen to you. So if anybody needs any prayer or healing, Kim can come up and pray for you. I thank you for you guys to give me this opportunity. Bye to Facebook. Hope that was okay with everyone. And goodbye.